Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of As Good as They Say, where we take a look at movies and we try to figure out if they're as good as they say. I'm Gru, and here
Uh,
are my co hosts.
I'm Jim.
I'm Seed.
And we're talking to you today about a little movie that came out on HBO Max or Crave if you're in Canada, called Zack Snyder's Justice League. This movie came out
Very little. 4 hours
long. They spent like $70 million to reshoot this thing. It came out and critics love it and people love it. But do we love it? Do we, the comic book nerds, love it? So we're going to find out.
Is it as good as they say?
Oh, was that a?
We'll fix it in post.
Is that a tagline? I wasn't informed.
Someone
kept me out of loop.
Where's my agent? Okay, so who wants? I guess I could start off with basic impressions here. So my take on the movie was, well, when the 2017 version of the movie came out, I really liked it. I'm a big fan of the Justice League. I like them in comics. I love the animated series from back in the day, during the Bruce Timm, Paul Dini run on Superman and Batman in the Justice League. I love all that stuff. I'm just a big fan of them. For me, I just loved seeing the characters on the big screen, and I really liked that movie. I'm one of, actually, I was corrected on this. I used to tell people I was one of like 3 people who liked it. Actually, we were looking at statistics the other day, Seed and I were, and actually a lot of audience members really liked the movie. It's the critics who didn't. But now it's kind of like the critics are all praising Zack Snyder's Justice League. So of course I like this. It's more of the same. It's a longer version. It's the same characters again. You're seeing some new things. But I like this one again well enough. I would say fairly a similar amount. What were your guys' takes on it? Jim, why don't you go next?
Well, so yeah, I like the 2017 version as well. And when I got this new one and I saw it was 4 hours, I just about fell on the ground. I'm like, 4 hours? Come on, I'm an adult. I don't have time for 4-hour movies anymore. So I had to break it up into, actually, I think you suggested it post fact. I broke it up into 4 television episodes over 4 days, basically. And it was like watching, like when Sherlock came out, 3 episodes, an hour and a half each. Like, okay, so it's watchable that way. But I really, the initial impression was they didn't need to change so much. They got their point across 3 years ago. That's my initial impression.
And Seed, what did you think of Zack Snyder's Justice League?
Yeah, so a little background on my experience into this. I did not see the original Justice League when it came out in 2017. I did not see Batman v Superman. I did see the new Superman with Henry Cavill, but I don't think there was a standalone Batfleck, right? So I just missed Batman v Superman. That was basically it, and the original cut. But I did see this one. I did kind of read up on what was the changes from the original cut to the Snyder Cut. But yeah, in general, I didn't really think of myself as a Marvel fanboy, but throughout the watching experience, all I could do was compare it to the Marvel movies because I have seen literally all of them, with the exception of the Hulk. But other than that, I really, yeah. So I kept comparing it back to that, and that's kind of where it grounds me in terms of how I approached this movie.
See, I'm really disappointed. You didn't see Hulk, the best of the Marvel, the 2 best of the Marvel.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah. But Seed, was it as good as everyone says? You didn't answer the question.
So,
Seed.
okay, yeah. If we're gonna look at that, well, and again, like I don't know if I'm becoming a Marvel fanboy. If I was a Marvel fanboy, I thought it was all right. Nothing special. honestly definitely not worth 70 mil to recut. But again, I didn't see the original. I don't know how bad it was in terms of how much it needed to be a $70 million fix in this case. And
I can answer that for you. It didn't.
yeah, the way they approached it, I would definitely say it definitely feels more like a mini series, like again what Marvel's doing with WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, 6 to 8 episodes broken up, right? But then the budget is just way too high if they wanted to go that route. So that's why it's kind of in that weird zone, is where they got a little too ambitious in some places and then not ambitious enough. But it was a solid enough movie. I just don't think it lives up to the hype, either pre-cut, the original hype for a Justice League movie, or the Snyder cut. I just don't think it's good. I just don't think it lives up in either case.
Well,
yeah, it's sorry, go ahead.
I mean, you got a point there, Seed. When you're spending 70 million, that's enough to do a whole other film. Although technically they kind of did. It was a 2.25 hour cinematic, and then they added almost 2 more hours of material. So it is almost like adding another whole film. But if they're going to spend that kind of money, like I think the things that they added, yeah, it makes it into more of a comprehensive universe is the idea, but I don't think you need to do that in one film. They tried adding in Darkseid after the fact. Is like, no, you know what, Steppenwolf could just let him be on his own. Like that's a thing that the Marvel films have done well. Each film had 1 or 2 bad guys that they introduced, and the overarching bad guy Thanos was mainly just in a post-credit scene, and they could have done that with Darkseid and just don't nerf Steppenwolf. He was doing just fine. He was pretty scary on his own. And if you're going to spend $70 million just to add Darkseid, I would have rather them add Green Lantern, my favorite DC hero, because Justice League isn't Justice League without Green Lantern.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, this movie. I mean, I like it in the same way I don't know if you guys have seen Watchmen or the Watchmen extended cut. I'm a fan of the Watchmen comic, and the Zack Snyder movie is another one of his. I think it might be some of his best work, honestly. It's so very faithful. And I've seen one of the extended cuts of that. I think there's several of them. Some of them are quite long, but for me, it was like when I watched that extended cut, yeah, it was unnecessary, but I liked it as a fan. I liked seeing more scenes with the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason, and stuff like that in that movie. And I felt like that here. The plot from the original movie didn't really change all that much. The only thing you can really say is maybe that in terms of polish, execution, things look better, of course, because they have a 2021 update for some of the graphics and the CGI and things like that. The color palette is obviously very different. You can get into detail about that. But for the most part, yeah, it's the same plot. I like it. I like having more scenes with Cyborg. I think he got to his moments to shine in this version. I'm okay with the Zack Snyder music video thing that people always talk about. He picks some good tracks, and it's very epic and cinematic. I think the film looks beautiful. Like it's gorgeous in terms of the cinematography. I think there are some shots in here that are very, very impressive, and it's easy to get swept away in. But yeah, like overall, like just as a movie, just in terms of the story, it didn't really change that much. I liked it well enough the first time.
Zack Snyder films always look pretty. 300, Watchmen, he always makes beautiful looking films. The thing is, if you're gonna so they add in extra scenes, which is great, and they look beautiful, and they add in Steppenwolf's digitized costume. It looks great. The thing is, why didn't they do that the first time? If you're going to spend that kind of money, I don't want this to become like a Cyberpunk 2077 situation where it's like, well, we released the first part, but then, you know, 3/4 of the story comes later and you have to pay again. And in the meantime, you get garbage until we get the good stuff. And that's why I had a problem with it. I'm like, you know what? Put your best foot forward. That's how I saw it.
So the reason, of course, that they nerfed it was apparently they had shot all this footage initially, or a great deal of it. They went back and did some reshoots, but very sadly, Zack Snyder's daughter passed away during the filming, so he left the production. And while he was gone, Joss Whedon was brought in to finish it up. But they had something that was unwieldy for cinemas at the time. They had, 4 hours of material. They're like, how do we cut this down into 2? So Joss Whedon came in, and it was cut down into 2 hours. Some new footage was added. He did things with the color that Zack Snyder didn't do in terms of the color timing and things like that. He added a whole bunch of jokes, and that's basically the product that you got back in the day. It was a movie for theaters. Now with this one, why I think the 4-hour runtime is justified is because this is how we consume media now, especially now that we're all trapped at home. But people are used to binge streaming, watching things all at one time. And the movie very conveniently cuts itself up into 6 parts for you. You could watch it 1 hour at a time, or you could watch it in these 6 parts. But I think this is very much speaks to the way we consume media. I did not mind the runtime at all, because I knew that I can just watch this thing at my leisure, and as much of it as I want at a time. I think I actually did end up binging it all in one day, because it just, it's the Justice League. It's my jam, right? But yeah, the reason why they didn't release it at the time was that basically a family tragedy.
I didn't know that they'd had a change in director. And I'll pass off to Seed in just a second. I went back and I did notice the stylistic change. Like my favorite joke when Superman first meets Steppenwolf, and he's like, I'm a fan of truth, justice, and ... the American way. It's like, oh, it's a Superman line. Of course that's written by Joss Whedon. Of course that's a Joss Whedon line. Go ahead, Seed.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, like, I think that kind of 4-hour supercut kind of situation works for, streaming. I don't think it ever really would have worked in the theaters. I mean, that's the reason why Harry Potter got broken up into 2 movies. That's the reason why I think
a bunch of films.
Yeah.
The Scorch Runner, The Maze Runner, Hunger Games.
Hunger Games was, I think, the first one to do. One of the first recent ones to do it, to break up and establish
one. It was actually Harry Potter.
Story.
The final film was cut in 2.
Yeah. Yeah,
they do that a lot for ending movies
to kind of break that into 2.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the way like certain things were brought in, I kind of liked Darkseid. He wasn't really that much into it, but you could kind of get enough of a tease. You could see what they were doing with him, kind of like what they did with Thanos and in the Avengers. They wanted to set this up. They wanted this to be a universe, and I just don't think this was successful enough for them to actually go ahead and do it, especially when they seem hesitant to bring things like Suicide Squad fully into their universe. They kind of want to keep some of their stuff separate, so I don't think they have enough to make a kind of DCU where you're going to have a gigantic crossover event. Gru?
It feels like that they just attach that on. If you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, you know that Thanos is the overarching enemy, and the guy with the hammer, he's the main bad guy in that film. And he stands up to Thanos, and he's badass all on his own, and it seems like he's equal with Thanos until you find out in later movies that he wasn't. The thing is with Steppenwolf, in the 2017 version, he's a scary bad guy all by himself. And then you add Darkseid in later, and then just retroactively turn Steppenwolf into a sidekick. I preferred it when he was the big baddie.
Well, yeah, there's a couple things there. I liked Steppenwolf better in this. I like that he kind of has daddy issues. He's not just conquering the planet; he's trying to win Darkseid's approval with 50,000 worlds. I thought that was hilarious and kind of sad. I love the fact that he's reduced to this kind of pathetic little character. I feel like he has a bit of character in this movie, which he didn't in the original movie. He looks
Definitely
a
looks
lot better. He looks
Looks a
so much
lot
better.
better.
I know we had differing opinions over the design, but I mean, even just the facial sculpt, it's like with the blue piercing eyes and things like that. And especially like when he's stripped, like there's that moment where he's stripped of his armor and you see him in the weird collarbone and his how his actual head is shaped like that. I thought it was a great design of, just the alien sculpt and things like that. But if you go back to Batman v Superman, you notice they are trying to set up this world because Batman keeps having visions about what would kind of be a flashpoint or an alternate
Oh,
reality
it's definitely the
timeline
alternate
going on.
reality.
The
And
Injustice
I
timeline.
do like that they set up.
yeah, the
I do
injustice
like that they
reality.
set up the Flash is the one who will eventually be able to get them
Yeah.
to move between realities, because I mean he moves at the speed of light.
Yeah, and that's again that's set up in earlier movies. So they did want to do a few a full DCEU kind of thing going on here. The thing is, they did it out of order. After the original Justice League came out, then you got the Wonder Woman movie, then two Wonder Woman movies, then you got Aquaman, then you got the Flash TV show was kicking off, and so people are more used to these heroes now, which is why I think this movie works better in 2021 than it did in 2017. We know who Aquaman is now. We've seen more
Yeah.
of him, etc., etc. People who aren't, comic book fans. And
I think their setup in so I wasn't the biggest fan of Batman v Superman, but some of the things they set up were really interesting, and I didn't want them to move straight to Justice League. I wanted them to go to Red Dawn, because they set that up with the Flash that Batman has of Tyrant Superman. I'm like, oh, I want to see that.
Well, yeah, Red Dawn is slightly different than Injustice, which is what I think they were setting
they're
up.
drawing influences from everywhere, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Batman v Superman has like Dark Knight Returns and stuff in there.
It's films, man. They'll mix it up. Like Thor Ragnarok was a mash of Mojo Vision and
Hulk,
yeah. Which, I mean, they did a great job because it was well written, but it's like, those two stories could be separated, and so maybe we want to see both of them with Superman.
Yeah, but my big problem with that is that you're not. It seems like definitely Zack Snyder wanted to do this connected universe. They're not bringing in. They're not bringing in the Birds of Prey or the Suicide Squad into their universe. They're keeping that very much separate.
That's too bad.
Right?
Well, the Snyderverse is effectively over now.
Well, and that was the other thing. The new Batman that Affleck was supposed to star in kind of got rewritten now to be separate, standalone, and now we have Robert Patterson. Is that his name?
Robert Pattinson. Yeah.
So now we have him as the new Batman. So there's no more link between that and Justice League.
And I think Henry Cavill is gone as Superman now. So, I mean, they still have, Gal Gadot is still Wonder Woman for all I know. Jason Momoa is still there. Ezra Miller is still there as far as I know. But yeah, you're missing two of the Holy Trinity right there. So they got Ben Affleck actually back to do some reshoots for this movie for Snyder Justice League during the pandemic. So that apocalyptic scene was new. But I don't think he's going to be coming back, especially when they have the wheels in motion for the Pattinson
I'm
film.
gonna say
so this Snyderverse is effectively dead. So this is kind of like, here, fans, it's almost like a token prize for people who are real fans of Zack Snyder, and there are a lot of them, right? Like, this was a movement to bring this movie back from fan outcry, which is an interesting aspect of it as well.
I think I'm gonna say two things. I think the problem is MCU had an executive. It was the vision of an executive who had a lot of clout at Disney, and he
Kevin
brought
Feige.
it all. Whereas a director you need directors with their artistic vision, but they don't have the muscle to get they don't have the muscle to get 20 films made in less than 10 years, which is what he had. Zack Snyder has an artistic vision for sure, but I mean, he needs the studio completely behind him, and directors just don't have that. The other thing is Arthur Curry has changed, in my opinion. They're never going to get any, like, it just can't be anybody but Jason Momoa anymore. It's scruffy Aquaman is the new thing. He used to be clean cut Arthur Curry in the comics. Jason Momoa comes in and changes the whole concept. Can't be anybody else.
Well,
ever again.
Yeah, well, I mean, dark and gritty is in, right? Like that's just not. It's not a DC thing. It's not a Justice League thing. It's like a lot of characters.
Dark and gritty, sure, but Henry Cavill is super clean cut, you know, and he's still like emo Superman. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the Snyderverse is very much like it leans into the dark and gritty. Also in terms of the color palette, which I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of Zack Snyder desaturation. I find the colors are very washed out. That's one thing I miss from the Whedon cut, was if you look at the shots side by side, you can see they're all superheroes, right? The colors are all popping. It's a much more colorful movie. Even changing some of the color temperatures to a warmer red in some scenes to a cooler blue, things like that. I'm not a big fan of that. It still looks good, just as a stylistic choice. It's not my go-to.
That's the thing I miss. Wonder Woman has never been popping with colors, but in the comics she is.
Well, I mean, everyone used to be popping with colors. Batman used to have a big yellow spot in the center of his chest, and they actually
for the Tim Burton era, please.
But in the comics, they actually kind of gave an explanation of that, where it's an armored, bulletproof section of his costume, and so the bright yellow signal in the center of his chest kind of draws attention and makes bad guys want to shoot there, so he doesn't have to fully armor himself. I mean, it's bullshit, but it's comic book bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, erasing color from costumes has been a thing forever. I mean, every single one, even flamboyant Tony Stark from the Marvel side, all of their colors got washed out compared to their comic book versions.
Yeah, do you remember when the X-Men first came onto the scene and they were all wearing that like black leather?
Black, yeah.
Yeah, it was all gone, and you know that was back in the Singer era, and he was more kind of
like.
I'm gonna have to disagree. I don't think they had washed it out until this film, because I thought they moved to more monochromatic and they made Batman more black and gray because he's a ninja. They made Superman all blue with a blood red cape instead of bright red. So they made it. He's two-tone instead of. I'm glad they got rid of the red underwear, but the Wonder Woman was just kind of brown, like her brown skirt and her brown shield and brown bodice. She used to be red and blue.
Yeah,
or yellow.
Well, I can demonstrate color saturation right now. So here, the way you see me in my screen right now, this is kind of Whedonverse. Maybe it's actually a little bit brighter. Maybe it's even a little bit like that. But Zack Snyder is kind of like this, where just all the color is drained. It's still there. There's still hints of it, but generally it's drained. I like, as you can see, like just in setting up my video, I like a little bit more color in my properties. Again, that's an aesthetic choice. In terms of cinematography, the shots are still very well composed. The interesting thing about these films is a lot of the Marvel films, I find the filmmaking is kind of there's not really shots that stick out to me. There's not really cinematic moments in general. Occasionally in some of the bigger event films, maybe they will have those, but these DC films, specifically the Snyderverse films, they feel more like films in a way. It feels like the shot composition and the music choices are very, very deliberate. And they're much more memorable, in my opinion.
I think it depends.
The bad stuff is memorable too, but the good stuff is also more memorable.
I really think it depends on the director. Like Zack Snyder is a very visual director. Like Tim Burton when he did his Batman. Like, it was very visually pleasing. Joss Whedon is all about writing it himself and having popping dialogue, and that comes out in the Avengers, or what's his name, the Kiwi who did Thor Ragnarok. Taika Waititi, when he did Thor Ragnarok, there's lots of jokes because he's all about jokes. So every director has their own imprint on it. Zack Snyder, you just notice it because it's, you might notice it more because he's all about visual. I wonder if a lot of his training was as an art director.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I think overall the production and kind of the directing choices are pretty strong in the movie, but it comes, for me at least, it comes back to the writing, and I just don't think the writing is nearly as strong. I can definitely see what you're saying. There's a lot of like, everything seems very deliberate with their shots, with their colors, with their timing. You don't always get that from the Marvel movies because they're like, it's just something like, oh, we're here to.
Or most movies, most Hollywood movies in general.
I mean, that's the thing too. The Marvel movies, like, there was a point in time where they were coming out with like 3 or like 5 of them a year. Like, they came out with the Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and I think there was another film, all released within the same year. Like, that's a lot. And only Disney has the muscle to do that.
They did 23 in 11 years.
Yeah, like it's a factory. It's very much a factory. That's why you have creatives like Edgar Wright, who's like, I can't work on this film. I have to leave. I don't have a creative voice here. Joss Whedon did the same thing, actually, after Avengers 2. He's like, I can't work in the factory system anymore. And he left. So you're right. Like, Kevin Feige and company, they've done a very good job at making these cohesive. But at the same time, I don't think you're getting the same kind of directorial vision as you have on some of these DC films. Like, I mean, like, Patty Jenkins is doing completely different things than James Wan is doing, than Zack Snyder is doing in the same universe. Whereas I don't really feel, apart from maybe James Gunn, I don't really feel the personality coming through of the directors so much in the Marvel verse, but they are more cohesive.
I think they do pop out with 3 or 4 of the MCU. But that's 3 or 4 out of 23, as opposed to there's been DCU has had 5 films, and they're all quite different from each other, as you pointed out.
Well, I think partially is because DC doesn't know what they want to do. They can't make a decision. Do we want to be gritty? Do we want to be realistic? Do we want to be funny? And they just keep, every time things don't work out, they just reboot it. And it's the same thing that happened with Spider-Man. They just kept rebooting him because they couldn't figure out what to do. Now they seem like they hit with something, because they hit with the Into the Spider-Verse and their cartoon side, or animated side, let's call it. And then they hit with what's his name?
Tom Holland.
In the live action side. So it sounds like they finally got something they're happy with. But if, like, the Hulk, they never found a Hulk they were happy with. Even with Mark
Ruffalo.
Even with Ruffalo, they never gave him his own movie. So it's just like they didn't have a direction for Hulk, and it seems like that's what happens with DC. They're like, we can do a Batman movie, we can do a Superman movie, couple of Wonder Woman movies, but it's like there's either no appetite or kind of good direction for them to pull together this kind of shared universe that this seems like Snyder was trying to do.
Yeah. Like, I think it's clear that they wanted to, by that point, they were aping the Marvel format, or they wanted that same thing, but they weren't necessarily doing the legwork to get there. And like, that's the thing, like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, these are all pop culture icons, right? Nobody really knew who Iron Man was before he got his movie. He was not necessarily in the same recognition.
Well, they
category.
were known.
Whatever you think about the superhero is like one other thing. I'm not talking about favorites. I'm just talking about popular consciousness. Like, I could start humming the Batman theme and 9 out of 10 people would recognize that from the Burton film. You know what I mean? It's got or the John Williams score from the Superman theme from the Chris Reeve films. You know, it doesn't have the same kind of name recognition, or it didn't until they started making movies introducing all these characters. Now they're household names. So they've done a really good job with that. Even Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'd never freaking heard of until the James Gunn film. It's like, now I know who all these characters are, right? And I like comic books. So
I think DC's mistake was like, everybody has a concept of Batman. Everybody has a concept of Superman and Wonder Woman. But the thing is, the MCU took second tier heroes or heroes who had been semi-retired for a long time and brought them back. Like Iron Man, he's a nut. He didn't get much attention before. Captain America was huge until the 50s, and then they retired him for decades. And then they wrote that into their story, and it made it really appealing. And they kept doing this with character after character. Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah. I mean, and again, they wrote it into the story. I'm Star-Lord. Who? Nobody knew who Star-Lord was. They couldn't have I don't know if they had like it was more difficult with their top line heroes like Spider-Man. Amazingly, they managed to pull it off with the X-Men, but the X-Men is not as huge an undertaking as MCU has been. The MCU was conceived as a franchise that will pump out as much as James Bond has done, but in a third of the time, in a sixth of the time.
Seed?
I mean, it's something that's just kind of like popped into me when we were kind of discussing that. It's also like who they got to play these roles, right? Like you have Ben Affleck, who is an established actor. You have Henry Cavill, who I guess you could argue got his start from the Man of Steel movie, so that's fine. You've got Gal Gadot, who was, and I'm just checking this up. She was in Fast and Furious. She was known. She was known commodity.
She wasn't very big.
Huh?
She wasn't that big.
She wasn't that big, but she was at least somewhat known. And then Jason Momoa, who was basically catapulted into pop culture through
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
So like you had a lot of established, and then more importantly than the main characters, the side characters, right? Like you had Jeremy Irons as Alfred. You had J.K. Simmons back as Gordon, and it was like one thing that like Marvel, and I think it was Harry Potter that started this trend, is we're not going to use established actors. We're going to find somebody that people don't have an opinion on, and then they're going to be who everyone thinks of when we say these character names. Like nowadays, it's, Robert Downey Jr. kind of reinvented his life thanks to the role of Iron Man. And
so did a lot of actors in MCU.
Yeah, and Chris Evans really was an unknown before he was Superman.
Everybody's forgotten. Everybody sees him as Captain America, but everybody's forgotten he was the Human Torch first.
He was, but like that was another movie that bombed, right? Like I think that's the big thing, was that they got all these established characters for side characters at least, and then I guess like half the main characters I would say are pretty established, and so you come in with maybe a more traditional outlook in terms of how you do acting, and just a quick note, and I'll turn it over to Gru, but it definitely felt like Ben Affleck was the senior actor in that cast. He really felt like he was the guy who knew what he was doing, and you could see a little bit of the green in some of the other guys, but like,
well, he was certainly the biggest name
for sure. And the same with the side characters. You could feel them bring the traditional kind of acting, like being quiet when a dramatic moment happens, or getting loud when action happens, right? Like that's something that you kind of learn as you're an actor. But sometimes actors don't know how to do that yet when they're just starting off, and they're just always on, or sometimes they're just always reserved. And then and that can bring a bit of quality when you're given rein to make these characters yourself and grow with the characters as they are in the story.
I'll have to disagree, but I think Drew's going to say something. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely agree either. I mean, for the first part, if you look at that first Iron Man movie, that is a stacked cast. Like Robert Downey Jr., people forget it was kind of he of course had some trouble in his past, but he had been an actor in a whole bunch of stuff before that. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is really the movie that brought him back into the spotlight. But yeah, Iron Man is his role and was his big break. But then you have like Terrence Howard, his Academy Award winning actor, Jeff Bridges, the same, Gwyneth Paltrow, all of these really, really seasoned actors in a comic book movie. Disney from the outset treated this like, oh, this is serious. We want to just have good actors in this role. And I will say both Marvel and DC, maybe not every single choice, but pretty much across the board, they have both had some really good casting choices. I like all of these actors in Justice. Just talking about this movie spotlighted, I like all of these actors, and I was skeptical of a few of them going in. Like many people, I was skeptical of Batfleck when I heard that casting announcement. I happily eat my words. Gal Gadot, same thing. I'm just like what? Really? Who is this? But completely
I've got one
changed
exception.
my mind from Batman v Superman on. She might be one of the best parts of that movie, actually. But yeah, I really like the casting in all of these movies. I don't think there's a weak member of the bunch, quite honestly.
Well, when they're going to spend, when they, a superhero film costs at least $100 million. And when they're planning to do several of them, when they're putting down $250 million or $500 million to make a half dozen movies or whatever it is, or maybe just one movie, because when they're spending that kind of money, they're really reticent to go with somebody who's unknown. And it's I thought it was kind of brave that they would go for somebody like Gal Gadot, who is not as established as Jason Momoa or Ben Affleck. Jason Momoa, I disagree with you guys. I thought he was huge already because he had done Stargate Atlantis, Game of Thrones. He had done the new Conan, not Hercules. He had done Conan. And I thought he was huge. But also at the same token, picking somebody who isn't so established is a risk, but sometimes that really pays off. When Game of Thrones picked their Jon Snow and their Samwell Tarly, both of them were fresh out of theater school. Same with all of the younger cast. It was all of them. It was their first gig. And Kit Harington, that might not have been that season, but he was really good. But so was Maisie Williams and Sophie Turner, and the guy I always forget the guy who plays Samwell, but he was astonishingly good.
Yeah,
and they were all new.
There's nothing necessarily saying that you have to have names or you have to not have names. I mean, at the end,
but it's a big risk.
It is a big risk. At the end of the day, you just want I mean, look at what happened on Star Wars. The what was it? The Solo, a Star Wars story, right? He was brought in. I can't remember the actor's name, the actor who played Solo, but they got him an acting coach on set because he hadn't been in a Star Wars picture before, he'd been in movies, but he hadn't been in a Star Wars picture before, which is a completely, it's a giant operation there. And then, of course, they got rid of Lord and Miller, and there was a whole bunch of production issues as well. But yeah, that happens sometimes. And it's like, it's different. It's different when you go from indie movies or, even movies with established directors to one of the biggest franchises of all time. And I thought his performance was fine. I thought he was absolutely passable. He was not the problem with that movie. That's another conversation about Solo, a Star Wars story, but I'm no problems with that. And but it's, I think at the end of the day, the fans just want someone who's going to, in some way love the characters as much as we do and, commit to that in the portrayal. And I think that's really...
that's the reason. Well, I mean, that's the reason why I think it's a good risk to take lesser known actors, because we're looking at the character, as opposed to when we did this for Batman versus Superman. Drew, I told you my problem was with Batfleck because they picked him because people will come and pay to see him do a film. Everybody wants to go see Ben Affleck. I wanted to go and see Batman. So that's why I didn't want Ben Affleck there.
It's true that stars can come with baggage, but I think they also can transcend that as well. I think
He did a
really
fine
you
job
gotta,
on it.
yeah, he did. I think you
Like
really
in,
have to
well, in
just
this one,
give people a
I
chance.
didn't
in the
like
role.
his first outing, but I did like him as the Tony Stark of Justice League. Because he really was. What's your superpower? I'm rich.
Yeah.
All right, that was fun.
So that was one of my comments I had on this movie was that line and what was the other one? Oh yeah, when he bought back the house for Clark, and he goes, "How'd you do it?" "Oh, I just bought the bank." I think Batman throwing around his money are definitely some of the funniest lines of the movie. And I think, I don't know, maybe we are agreeing with each other on this one, but yeah, no, this is what I'm saying. Like Batman, the Justice League has a more established cast overall. Like you said, Gal Gadot's somewhat established. By that time, Jason Momoa is definitely established, and I think they could have taken some more, maybe a little more risk with their casting, and maybe that would help, maybe it wouldn't. But it was just something I
Yeah.
noted. Yeah,
I
that's
don't
the
think
point that I was making. But Jason Momoa, I thought was perfect. He is the new Aquaman.
Yeah.
Nobody else can do it.
Actually, if you look at Aquaman in the cartoon from the 90s, it's very similar. He's a blonde, but he's got the long flowing hair and the beard. He's a badass with a hook for a hand, and he lost his hook by saving the life of his infant son, who was a baby at the time. He's such a badass in that cartoon, and I think that's a lot of where the inspiration comes from. So no disrespect to Jason Momoa, but there was a template for badass Aquaman, and that was that cartoon from the 90s, the Justice League cartoon.
I watched the older cartoon that I think was from the 60s or 70s.
Super Friends?
Or Super Friends?
Yeah, he was clean cut and like
and he talked to fish.
He was Henry Cavill but blonde.
Yeah. There's a so I mean, where does this leave us, I guess? Like, do we all kind of feel kind of lukewarm about this movie? Or like, I mean, I liked it well enough. I'm not in love with it. I think my final summation would be like, oh, the Justice League is a good movie. Yeah, it was in 2017 too. I feel like everyone is just cluing into that fact. Like this is just a solid superhero.
I'm disagreeing because I like the 2017 version and I thought the 2021 version was unnecessary.
Yeah, the way I feel, and I'm just gonna kind of circle back to a quick thing. Apologies to Ezra Miller, but he was definitely the weakest, or at least what they gave him to work with. I don't know. It could be either or. I did not like the Flash in this movie at all. I felt like no connection to the Flash from this movie at all. I think he hurt the movie. Overall, with the movie, I think I think they tried to be too ambitious, which ended up hurting the movie. Maybe that's just a Snyder Cut thing, and that's why Whedon went back and cut all this stuff down, because like you're throwing in teasers for all this stuff that you're not gonna do. Like you throw in Injustice teasers, you throw in the Martian Manhunter out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was
like, what was he for?
Yeah, he had
fan service. He was for fan service. He actually hurts that scene. It's a much nicer
there
scene.
to plan for a future sequel.
And it was the actor who played the general in Man of Steel.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait a second, did the general who used to tease Superman, you remember the end of Man of Steel where the drone crashes and he's like, are you effing stupid? That's a $7 million drone. Not anymore. It was that general who he was in Joss Whedon's Dollhouse. He's quite a good actor. The thing is, you changed his role all of a sudden. He went from being a U.S. general who's skeptical of Superman to now he's the Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, they did something like that in the Supergirl CW series as well. Martian Manhunter is masquerade. Well, he's a human being in disguise in the Department of Alien Affairs, DAE or whatever it's called in that. So there's a template. People have even seen Martian Manhunter before this movie. So
sure,
I feel like
do that, but write it in Man of Steel. He is just a general.
Yeah,
there's no hint whatsoever that he's the Martian Manhunter masquerading as a human.
Well, I mean, again, if they're looking to Marvel as kind of the success story, Marvel has done that. They've thrown in things where, 4 movies later they say, "Hey, remember that small detail I didn't tell you that you just glossed over? Well, guess what? Now it's a huge, massive detail." And well, spoilers to
Yeah,
Spider-Man
but if it's
Homecoming,
small
but I haven't
detail,
seen
that's
that.
one thing. In Man of Steel, this guy was a foil. He was on the hero side, but he was a foil for Superman.
Yeah, but
He
that's
was
what
the one who was saying, "Don't trust Superman."
yeah, but that was the whole Martian Manhunter thing, was that he's pretending to be a human and trying to get intel. I mean, that does fit the character.
Yeah, it didn't break the movie for me in any
didn't
way.
break it.
I didn't like it just because I would have preferred that conversation that happens with Lois Lane and Martha Kent actually happen with Lois Lane and Martha Kent and not Martian Manhunter in disguise. I get why he's there, but you kind of ruin this sweet, nice moment where these two are connecting over a shared loss, and you make it completely false. And I didn't like that. It doesn't break the movie for me. Yeah, no, I mean it's a I find it a solid film. I like the movie. It feels not so much like I'm watching a just a throwaway popcorn flick. It feels like there's a little bit something more here. You can feel the passion. You can tell that Snyder had something he really wanted to say. I appreciate that in a film, and it feels more like a good solid mini series, something like a Game of Thrones or something like that. I'm not going to go as far as to call it Chernobyl. Chernobyl is like the height of great mini series. If you haven't seen Chernobyl, watch Chernobyl. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. But I'm
And
not
if
going to put it
Dr.
on that level.
Manhattan had been in Chernobyl, there would have been no problem.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say it's probably one of the less, not like the last season of Game of Thrones, but maybe one of the season 5 or 6 or something like that. Maybe one of those later seasons where it's still good, but it's not as good, but it's still good. It's up there. I like the Justice League. I like seeing them again. I'm an easy sell for this kind of thing. This movie is fine. If I could live in a world where only one of them exists, I guess I would take this one just because it's more Justice League, but they're both good. It's not like Jim, you and I have had this discussion where there only is one version of the Lord of the Rings, and that's the extended edition. Despite what Peter Jackson thinks, the extended edition is definitive. With this, it's like,
Yes.
no, I like them both. They both have their appeal. I did like some of the humor that was cut out in the original. I missed some of the colors. The slow-mo goes on a bit too much for me in this one, but they both look good. This one looks better. It's got more polish. I'm happy with them both. I'm pretty easy sell here though.
I'm not as good as they say, is what I say. For $70 million, they didn't get much bang for their buck. First of all, my very favorite DC superhero was not in it. He's an integral part of the Justice League. They alluded to the Green Lantern in certain points, but I think they were afraid to include him because of how badly the Green Lantern film did. And it wasn't that good. And again, I'm going to disagree with Seed here. I don't think Barry Allen took away from the film, but he's my second favorite DC character. You could put a monkey in his suit, and I would still like him.
Yeah,
so
I like Ezra.
But on the whole, not as good as they say.
Not as good as they say.
Yeah, apparently there was. I don't know if it ever actually got to the point where they shot anything, but there was like an early kind of idea of bringing in Ryan Reynolds to do a cameo as a Green Lantern.
Well, I mean, Hayden Christensen is coming back as Darth Vader, right? So who knows? Ahmed Best is coming back as Jar Jar Binks. So
yeah, I don't think they actually got to the point where they shot anything with Ryan Reynolds, but they did have that idea of bringing him in as the Lantern.
He was he was fine in that role.
He's only going to agree to do it if he gets a Deadpool cameo as well for the blooper reel,
where he can play off of himself. I would watch that. I would absolutely watch that.
Well, I mean,
he's at some Hollywood office right now, this very moment, going, okay, so I want to do a Deadpool verse, like Deadpool kills the Marvel universe. I want to do that, and let's expand it to Deadpool kills the DC universe.
Yeah, DC's never going to agree to that.
Maybe. Who
Zero-
knows? They agreed to the Snyder
zero
Cut a
chance.
few years ago. That was impossible.
Ryan
No,
Reynolds
off
is
the
very
table now.
persuasive.
there was one crossover between Marvel and DC in the comics, and they had Superman fight Captain America, and they had it contractually agreed that neither Superman nor Captain America could lose that fight. So they ended up fighting, and they had to talk it out. They ended up finding they were manipulated, blah 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 blah. But yeah, no, these are two companies that are protective of their assets. They're not going to do something like
Well, you say that, Seed, but of course we have the infamous Sony Marvel deal, whereby Sony loans Spider-Man out to Disney to make movies with. That was thought to be impossible a few years ago as well, but that happened. So I don't think anything is off. I think this is the kind of the positive thing about the Snyder Cut is I never thought this was going to happen, right? I never thought the fans are crying. They want to see this movie from one director who's not like, he's big, but he's not like a Chris Nolan or anything like that, where people are saying, oh, Chris Nolan is going to save movie theaters and things like that by releasing one film. Like that's the narrative around the guy, right? He's not like a Spielberg or a Scorsese or a Tarantino or anything. I never thought this guy was going to get another shot to tell his movie. And he did. This is the landscape we're in right now. No property is dead. I don't think any options are off the table. And I do think that if you're looking for like an Avengers versus X-Men, I don't know what the rights are all around that. I know that Disney owns Fox now. I don't know about X-Men rights or anything
They've
like that.
announced
But I
it.
mean, Marvel, DC, I don't think it's necessarily off the table. I don't think anything is.
Well, Marvel and
It
DC,
might not be, but it's highly unlikely. Sony is a
But
much
so is this,
smaller-
is what I'm saying. This
No,
is
but-
unlikely.
But the thing is, Sony was a much smaller film studio than Disney. Warner Brothers is just as big as Disney.
I don't know
not
about
quite.
that.
It's smaller now.
No,
It used to be. but
nobody's.
I think they are. I think that the two biggest in the world.
they're the
No.
two biggest, but Disney is the king by far.
Disney is huge. They are huge.
The only thing is like with the X-Men, they're still part of the same universe. It just they had different rights.
Yeah.
Right?
But I mean, that's the only thing that really matters, right? Is who has the
Yeah.
rights.
yeah.
But can I see a world in which, I mean, this is also, so the entire Warner Brothers slate is coming to HBO Max, right? Can I envision a world in which DC is like, I don't know what to do with these characters? Because I mean, that's kind of a narrative we've had even throughout this conversation. They didn't really have a direction for this thing. Just loan them out to Disney to make movies with. I could see that happening, because here's the thing about that Sony deal. It's really, really good if you're Sony. They don't have to do any work and they reap so much reward. Like basically the main thing that Disney is getting out of it is like toy sales, which is still pretty big. But you know, they're footing the cost of these pictures and everything, and box office lion's share of that is going to Sony. So they don't have to do anything with this character. They just hold the rights and loan it out, and they make money by doing basically nothing. So I could absolutely see a world in which Warner Brothers does the same. Maybe they won't after, you know, the popularity of the Snyder Cut. I don't know. But that said, the Snyderverse is dead. We have two of the Holy Trinity not returning. So all bets are off at this point. And I think it's kind of an exciting landscape for media. I think it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see a lot of Marvel heroes appear in as he put it, Disney streaming shows and things like that. It's such an interesting, the way we consume content now is completely different than at any point in our history. So it's just anything can happen. Nothing is dead. Nothing is ever dead. Dune is coming back. You know, Dune. Like it's crazy. Nothing's off the table.
Don't get me started. Dune was fine. James McAvoy as the God Emperor. He is still the God Emperor, and nothing will ever change that. But I think it's unlikely to see a DC Marvel crossover in the films. Possible, but unlikely. The X-Men and Avengers crossover has tons of precedent. They were, in fact, the Infinity War in the comics was X-Men were heavily involved in that. Professor X turned a bunch of Thanos's minions against him. That was part of the way that they defeated him. But there's very little precedent of crossover between well, historically, DC and Marvel have had very little cooperation. The Watchmen was supposed to be a bridge between them, and DC just said, nope, I'm not touching that. And that's why it's the Night Owl and not Batman, and it's Dr. Manhattan instead of Superman, which I think made it better. So I'm glad DC did that. But it was Dark Horse Comics, and comic book companies don't tend to cooperate with each other very well. They cooperate with themselves very well, but not each other.
Well, again, like I think we are living in an age where, you know, when Full House is getting a reboot like 20 years after it went off the air as a sitcom in the 90s and things like that, I don't think anything is necessarily impossible. I mean, is it difficult? Like, sure, studio negotiations are always difficult. Spider-Man almost reverted back to Sony in one of the biggest gotcha moments in the industry, right? Because Spider-Man is arguably sells more than a lot of the other Marvel superheroes combined, right? So, I mean, that was a big deal when that happened. Mm-hmm. So, like, who really knows? Like, I mean, that's all I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of fertile ground for storytelling to happening. And this is something I've been saying for a long time as well, regardless of what you think of the Snyderverse, where both, and particularly DC, have been excelling, have been killing it, is in the animated features.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They just, I mean, they did The Killing Joke and Hush, which are two of the best reviewed comics just recently. Long Halloween is coming out, which is a famous Batman story. It heavily inspired the Nolan films, particularly The Dark Knight. So they've been killing it in cartoons for a long time. And this is like going back to, again, the Bruce Timm Paul Dini era, when you had Batman the animated series and Superman the animated series and the Justice League TV series, right? Like, all of these same creators are involved in these projects, right? And they're adapting the popular comic stories. I mean, they've done Justice League War, and they've done Justice League Dark, and they've done Superman Doomsday.
And these are things that they already own. All of these comics. They tell good stories.
They do. They can.
That they already own.
They can. And that's the thing for me. Like, I don't necessarily need, it's fun seeing these characters on the big screen and, in, real life, but the cartoons are still doing a really good job. I'd say, like, I enjoyed them more than a lot of Marvel and DC films, the cartoons. So I'm very satisfied.
Now, I would never discount animated films. No. I think my favorite, hands down, my favorite Marvel film is Planet Hulk.
That's a good one.
Because it's like they can do it for a few $1 million instead of a ridiculous amount of money, and then watch Hulk and then The Incredible Hulk both flop. But Planet Hulk was quite successful and really good.
Yeah.
Excellent story.
You can take a lot more risks in a way. And a lot of these films are really short too. That's the thing. A lot of them are like an hour 10. Not that a lot of work doesn't go into them. Of course
Instead of 4 hours.
Instead of 4 hours. Yeah.
And I will sit through Lord of the Rings Extended, which is like 11 hours. Yeah. So
or all of the Star Wars movies, which we did in the theater, Jim and I. That was insane.
And I'm still having nosebleeds from it.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Sorry, C, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so like I don't mind the 4-hour runtime, but like it needs to be, it can't be set up. Like the problem was we got nothing for Batfleck, except for the Batman v Superman movie, but even that really didn't establish Batfleck that much. No. Like the Flash is new in this, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna guess a lot of people who see this don't watch the CW Flash.
These shows are pretty popular. The Flash and Arrow, the Arrowverse as it's called, it is pretty popular. It's not necessarily my jam. I like elements of these shows, but it's very monster of the week. There's 24 episodes a season. It's too much for me. Like 1 hour episodes each time. It's too much for me. It's not that they're even badly done. It's just this long but it's definitely... I'd rather have a tight miniseries. I'd rather have something like what Game of Thrones was doing, or what this Justice League movie ostensibly was, which is a one-shot miniseries about the Justice League. You watch it in 4 hours. That's, I like a little bit shorter in terms of the content. I like a little bit shorter seasons, 10 episode seasons, things like that, even shorter than that sometimes, where they just really work it and try to make a good season. Like I think the serialized day of like 24 episodes, 30 episodes a show, I think that's kind of like a dinosaur even in the sitcom landscape. I'd rather see less done better. And for me, this was, if you're putting it in those terms, compared to like a CW season of television, I think this was much preferable. Much
It
more
is, but at
preferable.
a much higher cost, right? You're
Yeah.
talking about the cost of making the original film, and it costs 70 million to redo the shots and a lot of CGI, right? Like this is why it can't be a miniseries. It just costs way too much. Miniseries have to be like super on budget.
I mean, you say that, but then you have like Game of Thrones and things like that, and a lot of these really high quality. I mean, that's probably like the top end of the scale, but you do have some really high quality productions of things, dramas with shorter seasons at the very least.
Yeah.
Well, Chernobyl is an example.
Or The Mandalorian, right? Over on Disney Plus. Like that's what, like 8 episodes a season, and that's very high production value.
High production, but high production doesn't always mean high budget. Like right.
It's not cheap. It's not cheap to make that show.
No, but you can throw hundreds of millions of dollars and get a film like Solo that you have pointedly said it just looks brown.
Everything's
as opposed to the example I like to use is Serenity and Star Trek Nemesis came out in the same year. Serenity, they both made $50 million, and Serenity was considered a success because they only spent 40 and people liked it and went to see it and it made money. And Star Trek Nemesis, which I liked, but it was, they threw money at it, not a lot, but they threw too much money at it and it lost money. They spent 60 and only made 50. And so it was considered a flop. It's money doesn't always equate to good product.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, but money often dictates whether or not a production goes forward. And like for
most of the time,
like I needed to see Flash. I needed to see Wonder Woman, who now has her own movie series. That's fine. I needed to see Aquaman, who now has his own movie series. That's fine. I needed to see Victor Stone. Like I don't want to first learn about half of my cast from this movie. I needed to know who they were before, and that's the only reason why the Avengers worked, was because each of them had a successful movie before they decided or before they greenlit the massive crossover. No one was learning about any of the Avengers going into that movie.
Hawkeye, Black Widow.
Well, Hawkeye and Black Widow, sure.
For supporting characters, though.
But they're
they're in the money shot, right? Like that's
they are, but
there.
that's what 2 out of 6 versus here we don't have a
2 out of 6.
But
you get Flash, you get Cyborg
Aquaman at the time, and I don't think we had Wonder Woman at the time.
At the time, but that's why I'm saying I think the movie works now is because people are more familiar with these characters, which is why I think it's, again, maybe that was my perspective going. I was already fans of them, so when Cyborg appeared, I'm like, oh yeah, Cyborg, like I'm raring to go, right? But for the general movie going public, like I think they're more used to these characters or to characters like this now, and because some of them have TV shows, Martian Manhunter has appeared on television, right? And then you have Legends of Tomorrow and stuff like that. So there is a template for this.
Martian Manhunter showed up in Smallville. Back
in the day, yeah.
It's nothing about knowing the character. Sure, everyone's heard of Superman, but do they know Henry Cavill as Superman? Everyone knows Batman.
I don't think that's as important.
Ben Affleck as Batman and what he brings to the show.
Well,
everyone knows the Flash, but do they know Ezra Miller? Everyone knows Aquaman, but how is Jason Momoa in that role? Like every actor is a different version.
Here's my thing with all of that. How many times do we need to see Krypton exploding? How many times do we need to see Martha and Thomas Wayne murdered in that alley? Like some of these we've seen so many times.
Well, I don't think we need have to be an origin story.
It doesn't have
we don't have to have an origin story. The first time we saw Batman in live action, right? Apart from like in a movie, he was already established. Batman was already a known commodity in that universe. The audience didn't know him. He was introduced visually and through storytelling, but the audience didn't know who this was. We
And
don't
the same thing with
necessarily need the
Spider-Man
origin story.
showing up in the MCU. We didn't need an origin
No,
story.
no, we
It's
didn't.
already been done.
We'd seen it
That's
twice
why-
before on the big screen.
That's a big problem I had with Batman v Superman is they tried to do another Batman origin. And I like the fact that we didn't find out much about Cyborg or the Flash before Justice League. I kind of like that. And not every character has to have an origin story, like or necessarily have a standalone film, because it worked in the MCU with Natasha Romanoff and Clint Hawkeye.
Okay.
People love those characters.
Yeah, but
They've never had standalone films.
let's be serious.
And we only saw Mark Ruffalo in that role in that first Avengers movie. This was a new Hulk. Even though it had the same backstory, it was a new Hulk. Even the way he got angry was completely different. There was nothing about adrenaline. It was all about anger. Even his power set and his look was completely different. So I don't think you necessarily need to have that established prior. I do think having time to establish things helps. Like, I love the scene with Flash in this. That's a brilliant short film in and of itself, where you first see his power in action. That was great. I love the scene with Vic Stone where he's learning about his power, and you see that in action and the visual representation of that. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was gorgeous. I thought that him giving money to people who need it with his power, basically being a technological Robin Hood, I thought that was beautiful. You always talk about heroes saving the day. For him to save someone economically, especially to see that now, I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was wonderful. So I liked the way they were introduced in this movie. They didn't get that in the original. That is a nice improvement.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. That's a hard disagree with me. I could not connect with Ezra Miller's Flash. I did not like that character at all. There was got a little more acceptable later on, but that was in my opinion, terrible character. I'm sorry.
The opinions of Feed Freedom do not respect that of As Good As They Say.
I'm sorry.
No, it does. It's fine. It's fine. You didn't like him. That's fine. I liked him fine.
But that's the thing. It's not the character. It's the actor. I think.
No. I mean, it's partial. I think it's partially both. I don't know. I didn't really like Ezra. Like I don't know if I don't know what it is, and
I'm gonna hard disagree with you on there. I think so he wasn't the strongest actor, but I think Lex Luthor is one of the best supervillains you can have. And then in Batman versus Superman, the guy they cast in the role was horrible. He should have been the Joker.
Yeah, that was my thing. I liked him as the Joker. This is a separate conversation, but I liked him. I liked him in that movie because he was the only person having fucking fun. He was the only person who smiled or laughed or anything like that. He was having fun. He was a scenery-chewing villain, like right out of the Adam West.
But he wasn't the criminal.
I liked it. He wasn't a good Lex Luthor, but he was a good general villain. If they had called him the Joker, I would have been fine with it. He's still a better Joker than Jared Leto.
If they swapped him with Jared Leto, it would have been more believable. That guy is the Joker, and Jared Leto as his criminal mastermind Joker. Well, no, he's the Prince of Clowns. He could have done Lex Luthor maybe, but he was too conniving and too forward thinking, as opposed to look at Heath Ledger as the Joker and the way they wrote him. It's like you really think that I planned this? I'm like a dog chasing a car.
No. Sorry. I've had this conversation with I think with Gru before. No, and I know everyone loves Heath Ledger, but no, he did have a plan. That was the whole thing. The whole thing was a lie.
Yeah.
The whole thing was he did have a plan. He is not a good Joker.
No, I like that interpretation of the Joker. I see what you're saying.
Way too much.
I see what you're saying. I like that interpretation of the Joker. But I can see how you're saying that's not the Mark Hamill Joker, for instance, right? But even the Joker, even at his most chaotic, he did have plans. Look at the Killing Joke, right? That whole thing is orchestrated.
And that's fine.
The point of the plan is chaos.
Joker can plan things at times.
Oh yeah,
the fact that everyone seems to.
He's a homicidal maniac.
He's 10 steps ahead in that movie. I'll give you that. He is 10 steps.
Yeah, but the thing is,
I don't mind
everything in that movie was a plan, and everyone goes, "Oh, look how wacky and crazy."
No, but I'm not saying that the Joker can't have a thought in his head. He can, but he's a homicidal maniac, whereas Lex Luthor is a criminal mastermind. He's a behind the scenes, pull the strings kind of guy.
Yeah, he was a
And
mustache
he's
twirling
always
villain
calm and
in
collected.
Batman versus
He is. He
Superman,
stole 70 cakes, and that's bad.
I don't. Do you guys get this vibe? Because this is something that has always bothered me, always about Jared Leto's Joker. It seems like he's doing a Heath Ledger impersonation. I really get that impression, and not a particularly good one. I really don't like this interpretation. Even the new footage they shot for this movie, yeah, it was cool seeing him in that apocalyptic environment, and his verbal exchange with Batman was interesting, but I really don't like this portrayal of the character. It feels like a guy doing an impersonation, not a real person, a real actor playing a role.
I agree with you. I don't like his interpretation of the character
At all.
But his new scenes in Justice League, the 4-hour version, were better than the stuff he did in Suicide Squad.
By a country mile. I don't like the way he's playing it still. I don't like, even his laugh doesn't do it for me. It's like, think of the Joker laugh. Again, Mark Hamill and Heath Ledger and Jack Nicholson and Cesar Romero, they all have these iconic laughs. And that's not even talking about the plethora of people who played them in the animated verse. But yeah, it just, nothing about it works for me.
But also,
sorry, Jared.
Jared Leto is just a bad person. He's just a mean, garbage person who shouldn't be rewarded with more films. Like Marlon Brando, just a mean person who should not have been rewarded with more films.
Oh, he was a terrible Joker. He never even played the character.
He was a terrible Jor-El. Marlon Brando was a terrible. I'm not a big Russell Crowe fan, but he was a much better.
Russell Crowe did a good job as Jor-El. The one thing I liked about Brando's Jor-El is they parody it in Megamind, and it's really, really funny. He's like, oh, I'm a space dad, Megamind. Megamind! I would recommend Megamind here on the channel. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty solid superhero movie. It's if Brainiac wins over Superman in the first 10 minutes of the movie and has to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of his life. It's great. Go see Megamind.
There are plenty of more superhero cartoons that we could talk about. And I want to say our next episodes maybe should be The Incredibles. Or what's the one with the dog who has the super bark?
What's that? Bolt?
Bolt.
Wonder Dog?
No, Bolt. Bolt the super dog.
Oh yeah, that was a fun one.
And
you know what I think we should do?
He's not a superhero. He just plays a superhero.
Yeah, that was a fun movie. That's an underrated.
So was
Disney
The Incredibles. I didn't even see the first Incredibles. The second one was just great.
Oh, you got to see the first Incredibles. It's probably my favorite Pixar film. It's probably my favorite Pixar film. It's one of my favorite superhero films. This is what we should do for next time. We should do like top 10 favorite superhero films. I think we can fill that list easy.
I'm up for it. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of cartoons.
Well, there's going to be.
We could do 2 lists, man. We could do 1 live action, 1 cartoons. Those are 2. You know, top 10 might just all be cartoons, you know.
So I think we've answered the question. Drew and Jim have answered the question as good as they say. Seed?
No.
It's not as good as they say.
It's not bad, but no, it's definitely not as good as
again, for me, it's not revolutionary. It's as good really as it was the first time around, especially in terms of the plot. There's a little more polish, but is it revolutionary? No, but I liked it the first time around, so I like it now.
We've got a problem then. We're all agreeing. We're all gonna have to disagree next time.
Yeah, it's only fun when we're at each other's throats, eh?
Well, I am gonna say that Seed Freedom is wrong about the Flash, and you guys are both wrong about not having Green Lantern.
Yeah, no, I'm apologies to Ezra Miller, but no, I couldn't get into the Flash in this one.
I am not apologizing to Jared Leto. You're fine. You're fine, Jared. You're fine. No.
Well, I guess that's our episode of Zack Snyder cut of Justice League.
It is not, by a 3-way consensus, it is not as good as they say. But it's still pretty good. Go see it.
I would say, however, as a postscript to that we should collectively say, Zack Snyder, try again. I would.
If
I
he
would
was
pay to
given
see
the
his next film.
if he was given the chance, I kind of want to see what he does with the.
Yeah, I
but
would
he
like to
can't
see.
now.
It's kind of the bittersweet thing about it because there clearly is a plan here, and there clearly is passion and a vision here.
It doesn't
So it's
have to
sad
be
he doesn't get to
new.
execute it. But
I
you
have
guys
always
concentrate on
enjoyed Zack Snyder films. He got
Yeah.
maligned a lot for 300, but I'm happy to see whatever his next film is.
Oh yeah, for just him as a director, yeah. No, but like this universe, I think they set up so much they want to do,
Yeah.
and the fact that it's not going to happen just turns that positive into a negative because now you've just pissed off people who were excited to see this new stuff that he was going to bring in, like Injustice,
Yeah.
Flashpoint. They set up Green Lantern. They teased
It's borrowing
Martian
from a
Manhunter.
lot of places.
All this is
It's,
just blueballed.
It's not a first time for
Justice
DC
League
though.
4.
Like, I mean, look at if you we've all seen Green Lantern, Ryan Reynolds' version of Green Lantern, and then they had the post-credit scene, and if you haven't seen how it should have ended, then they hit it right on the nose when it comes to Sinestro becoming the Yellow Lantern. The narrator's just like, oh, these guys thought there was going to be a sequel. That's adorable.
It's a shame because I really liked a lot of the actors in that. I liked I liked the Sinestro. I liked the Kilowog. He was fine as Hal Jordan. That was good. If they brought in Green Lantern, I'm guessing it would probably be Jon Stewart right now because that cast is pretty white. I think Ezra Miller is half Asian. But I mean, it's a pretty white cast, and just knowing the landscape of Hollywood right now, I like Jon Stewart though. He's good. He's good cookies. He's the one in the cartoon, so that's where my heart would go all the time. But
are we talking about the same Jon Stewart from The Daily Show?
No, Jon Stewart.
Like,
Jon Stewart was the Green Lantern.
He's an African American Green Lantern.
There's many Green Lanterns, right? There's Kyle Rayner and Guy Gardner and all these people, and then the African American, first African.
Oh, okay. So it's like Michael Jordan, not the basketball player, but the guy who played Killmonger.
Michael B. Jordan, yeah.
Yes, Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
Just like I met a Michael O. Jackson, and he was a dancer, but he wasn't the Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So,
anyways, guys, Justice League, pretty good movie. Not as good as they say. They're raving about it right now.
Hold on. So let's end it that way. Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would recommend it. Yeah, I mean, for a Justice League fan, for a superhero comic book fan, easy. But even for a casual viewer, I think people can take this long form content now. We're all binging shows. We're all used to it. We all know these characters more. I think this is a pretty easy movie to access for a general viewing audience. I think general audiences would like this, and the critics seem to bear that out. So, critics and audiences seem to like this.
I think critics are quite often wrong, and I would say if you haven't seen it, go see the 2017 cut.
Yeah, I would say if you have 4 hours to kill, watch it. Don't. Otherwise, I don't recommend it.
Well, who doesn't have time right now? What, you have somewhere to go?
With the viewing list that you've given us, Gru, no, we don't have the time.
Yeah. Well, you're rewatching Game of Thrones right now.
I will put it this way. I would rather watch Falcon Winter Soldier. Which is
I don't care as much about the characters for me. Like, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen WandaVision. I don't really care about the Scarlet Witch and Vision the way I do about Cyborg or Flash.
The writing is better. I'm just gonna say it. The writing's better.
I don't know. Marvel writing for me is kind of, I don't know. It's kind of joke heavy. It's kind of I don't know.
See, but you've contradicted yourself in the past, because sometimes Marvel writing is good, especially when it's like Taika Waititi doing it or Joss Whedon doing it.
I liked James Gunn. He's probably my favorite of their directors and writers.
And he did a good job as well.
He did a great job, but all the other movies seem the same to me. They pretty much.
James Gunn was killed off from the MCU universe, from the Marvel universe.
He was. They brought him back.
Yep.
Oh, well.
He's coming back for Guardians 3. I'm excited for that. That's like the only project in their Marvel slate that I'm actually. What If looks kind of cool, and Guardians Christmas looks cool.
Loki.
Well,
I don't care
Mandalorian is
that
going
much
to keep
about
going. Who?
Oh,
who
well, yeah,
thought-
that's not Marvel though. That's Star
Who
Wars.
thought that John Favreau could write that well?
Oh, I
Jon
did.
Favreau.
He
Well,
can't-
Dave Filoni too, right? Who did the Clone Wars and Rebels and things like that. He knows this universe. Like they should just hand him the keys to it. But yeah, even they're bringing on great people. They're bringing on not George A. Romero. Who is it? George Romero? No, not George Romero. Robert Rodriguez came in to direct. Bryce Dallas Howard, Taika Waititi again.
Well,
they're bringing in really good people to make this thing
I
happen.
think Disney has a history of liking to be in control, and I think
Yes.
they're realizing that if they give their directors and writers a bit more license, they get a better product.
I don't know.
For
Maybe
example, Mandalorian or Thor Ragnarok or Deadpool.
We talked about this for serialization, though. The problem they had on Star Wars was there was no overall plan. They were doing it movie to movie, and when they changed directors, the plan would radically shift and shift back. So there was no foresight in that case, where having a Kevin Feige type person to oversee everything would have been a good, or a Jon Favreau or a Dave Filoni would have been a good idea in that case.
Even a George Lucas, I would say that.
Oh yeah, his version is way more cohesive. Way more, even the prequels.
I'm not a huge fan of Star Wars 1, 2, and 3, but it's much better than 7, 8, and 9.
It tells a complete story. There's a plan from beginning to end. The plot, it's like Game of Thrones. The plot points are all there. Sometimes it's just the execution doesn't work, but the story is good.
Yeah.
The ideas are good.
And that's why when you have a studio that's willing to give its artistic people a bit more creative license, and you get people in their correct roles, like Spielberg directing and George Lucas as the executive producer, you get Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think one of the best films ever made.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. It's really good.
It's gritty and edgy and fun and serious, but light all at once.
Yeah, I like all those movies. I even like the one with Mutt. What was it called? Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It was fine. It wasn't as good as the originals. It was still fun. Still a fun outing. I wouldn't ever say it's a bad movie. Not when you have Cate Blanchett as a communist bad guy who's also a psychic. Now, how can that movie be bad? It can't.
When is Cate Blanchett not a communist bad guy who's psychic? I mean, even in Lord of the Rings.
Pretty much always. Cate Blanchett can do anything and I'll watch it. She can eat a piece of pie and I'll probably be fascinated.
I think she's done that in the film. Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was Elizabeth the Golden Age.
She ate pie? I gotta go and see this movie now just to see her eat that pie.
Okay, we're way off tangent.
What are you talking about? This is the bread and butter of this show.
I think,
bread and butter.
I
I thought we were talking about pie. What?
Cut us off when
I'm getting lost.
I think when I think you're going to want to edit from the part where we said our is it as good as they say? I think you're going to want to cut there.
This could be the bonus feature. This could be
released exclusive.
Release the as good as they say cut.
And it'll be 4 hours long.
It'll be 4 hours long.
Because we're getting close to that.
I want to see Peter Jackson direct the Bible. It'll just be years long. He'll shoot it in a week. It'll still end up being years long to sit
there. But it won't matter if Cate Blanchett is the lead actor.
No, it won't matter. Yeah, she play all the roles. I would see that. She played Bob Dylan at one point, and it kind of worked. Yeah, it's called, what is it called? No Direction? I don't remember what it's called. I think it's called No Direction Home or something like that. I don't remember. But it's a movie where Bob Dylan is played by a whole bunch of different actors. He's played by like a 10-year-old African-American kid at one point. It's kind of a weird artsy movie. I'm Not There. It's called I'm Not There. And at one point she plays Bob Dylan and does a pretty good job. So because of course she does. She's Cate Blanchett.
There are some actors who can do just about anything. And Cate Blanchett, Patrick Stewart. I
did like her as Hela. She was a fun villain in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
not my favorite movie, but I mean, Kate Blanchett was in it.
And Patrick Stewart also makes a fun villain, and neither of them play villains that often. Patrick Stewart was the villain in Ransom. It was a was it Ransom or was it no? It was a Conspiracy Theory. It was a Mel Gibson film before Mel Gibson went completely crazy, and he was a paranoid that thought the men in black suits were out to get him, and it turns out that Patrick Stewart was the man in the black suit who was out to get him. And Patrick Stewart is a wonderful bad guy, and he's doesn't play the
general. Yeah, he's played a bad guy a couple times. I still have to see. I think it's called Green Room, which is like this indie where he plays like a skinhead or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but I mean that sells you. Do you know Ian McKellen is doing Hamlet now? He's playing Hamlet. Yeah. They're doing an age-blind casting version of Hamlet, and he's Ian McKellen. So yeah, let him play any part he wants. You know, he could play Little Nell. It'll be fine. You know, actually,
I think I would go to see Ian McKellen as Juliet before I go to see him as Hamlet.
I would go to see him as anything. You know, if you get a chance to see Ian McKellen doing Shakespeare, I don't care. You could play the nurse. You could play freaking, I don't know, anything. He could do the role. It's a very, very weighty role. He could do the role. Like what are you talking about? One of the most experienced Shakespearean actors on the planet. Yeah, he can do the role.
Well, Seed and Grew, I have to pack it up. I still think that you should cut us at the point where we say it's as good as they say.
No, we're going to do this whole thing. You know why? Because we're all going to go 3, 2, 1. It's as good as they say. And then I'm going to... Okay, everyone. That was the Jim Grew and Seed Freedom cut of... this episode is As Good As They Say, where we talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Where's my
tune in next time where we discover if the movie we're talking about is as good as they say. Kind of worked. Cheers.
We gotta work on that.
Good night, guys.
See you next time.